Silence fills the room. A man sits hunched over his phone, scrolling mindlessly through images that mean nothing. His wife stands at the door, keys in hand, ready to drive their son to football practice, organize the community fundraiser, and later prepare a presentation for tomorrow's board meeting. She doesn't ask if he'll help anymore. She knows the answer. This scene plays out in countless homes across the modern world, not with shouting, not with conflict, but with a quiet surrender so subtle most never notice it happening. The masculine retreats, the feminine advances, not by choice but by necessity. Why? Carl Jung have spent decades studying the human psyche, and what he witnessed is unprecedented. A mass withdrawal of masculine energy from the world, creating a vacuum that feminine energy must fill. This is not political, this is psychological, this is primal. This is about the fundamental forces that shape human existence. You notice it everywhere if you have eyes to see. Men who speak without conviction, men who act without purpose, men who exist without presence. They are physically present but psychically absent, ghosts haunting their own lives, and as they fade, women solidify. As they retreat, women advance. As they diminish, women expand. Nature permits no empty spaces. Power abhors a vacuum. When men step back, women must step forward, not because they want to, because they must, because someone must carry what is being dropped. Look closely at the modern man. What do you see? Do you see the warrior, the builder, the protector, the creator? Or do you see something else? Something subdued, something docile, something tamed? Look at the pattern that has unfolded over generations. First, men treated women as objects, as bodies for pleasure, as decorative possessions. They reduced the feminine to flesh, to visual stimulation, to sexual availability. They taught women that their primary value lay in male desire. And what happens when you teach someone that their power lies in being desired? Eventually, they master that power. Women began to recognize the strange authority they held over men who had reduced them to sexual objects. They discovered that men who see women as bodies become helplessly controlled by those same bodies. The sexual power dynamics inverted. The objectifier became the slave to the object. The viewer became captive to the viewed. The consumer became consumed by his consumption. Women wielding their sexuality strategically gained leverage over men who could not control their response to it. And men, confronted with their own weakness, their own inability to master their desires, their own slavery to stimulation, did what the psychologically undeveloped always do. They blamed their captors rather than their captivity. They pointed to revealing clothing rather than their inability to remain centered in the face of it. "She's manipulating me with those leggings," he cries, never questioning why he can be so easily manipulated. "Social media is full of women using their bodies for attention," he complains, never addressing why he gives that attention so freely. "Feminism has destroyed the natural order," he insists, never acknowledging that his own objectification of women created the very weapon now used against him. Jung would recognize this as projection, the psychological defense where we attribute to others what we cannot accept in ourselves. The man who cannot control his sexual response projects his weakness onto the woman who tempts him. The man who feels powerless blames feminism rather than facing his own surrender of power. This creates the perfect downward spiral. Men objectify women. Women learn to use that objectification as leverage. Men become increasingly controlled by their response to female sexuality. Women gain power through this control. Men feel further weakened. Men blame women for their weakness. The cycle deepens. And in this swirling psychological vortex, women increasingly step into leadership roles, not just because men have retreated physically, developmentally, and virtually, but because women have often been forced to develop greater psychological maturity, greater emotional intelligence, greater capacity for balanced decision-making. The sexual battlefield becomes a microcosm of the larger power shift. The man who cannot master his response to a woman's body reveals his fundamental lack of self-control, his essential weakness. And women, recognizing this weakness, naturally question, "Why should I follow someone who has so little mastery over himself?" The first drain on masculine vitality is physical. It is sexual. It is essential. The modern man spills his seed constantly, compulsively, without purpose or direction. He squanders the raw material of creation, the fundamental energy that fuels ambition, drive, and determination. Jung called this libido, not just sexual energy but life force itself. When constantly depleted, constantly drained, constantly released without purpose, it leaves men hollow. Empty vessels make no sound. Empty men exert no force upon the world. Consider the ancient traditions that understood this connection. Warriors abstained before battle. Artists contained before creating. Leaders preserved their vital essence because they knew that dispersing it meant dispersing their power to change the world. What happens physically affects us mentally. The constant search for release creates a mind that cannot focus, cannot sustain attention, cannot build momentum toward meaningful goals. It creates men who start but never finish, who dream but never accomplish, who desire but never manifest. Now watch how a man behaves after this constant release. His voice softens, his gaze lowers, his spirit quiets. He becomes receptive rather than projective, passive rather than active, agreeable rather than forceful. He experiences a cyclic depletion that leaves him existing in a perpetual state of mild surrender. And who fills this power gap in his home, his workplace, his community? Who steps into the space where his vitality once stood? The women around him have no choice but to assume the reins he has dropped, to make the decisions he avoids, to direct the energy he no longer projects. But this physical drain is merely the first weakness. The second runs deeper, into the very structure of psychological development. Jung identified the puer aeternus, the eternal boy, who never fully separates from the maternal influence, never completes his psychological birth into manhood. Look at how many grown men live today. Their physical bodies matured, but their psyches remain adolescent. They avoid definitive choices. They fear irreversible commitments. They live in possibilities rather than actualities. Most crucially, they resist the psychological death and rebirth that creates a man distinct from maternal protection. These are the 40-year-old boys still living with mother, literally or figuratively. These are the men who cannot choose a path, cannot stick to a purpose, cannot build something lasting, because all of these require the psychological separation they have avoided. They float above existence rather than rooting firmly within it. They maintain the comforting illusion that all options remain open, that nothing need be sacrificed, that adulthood with its painful limitations can be indefinitely postponed. And again, who must compensate? Who must become the psychological adult in relationships, families, organizations, when men remain eternal children? Women step into this structural void not by choice, but by necessity. Someone must make the hard decisions. Someone must accept limitations. Someone must carry the psychological weight of actual adulthood. But there exists a third drain on masculine presence, one uniquely modern and increasingly powerful: the escape into virtual worlds. Each day, millions of men retreat from physical reality into digital realms, where they experience synthetic versions of masculine achievement. They hunt digital animals instead of providing real food. They build digital empires instead of actual businesses. They fight digital battles instead of confronting actual challenges. They become legendary heroes in games while remaining anonymous nobodies in life. The masculine spirit craves challenge, craves conquest, craves meaningful achievement. When these are not found in an increasingly sanitized, regulated society, men retreat to where they can find synthetic versions of these experiences. The dopamine flows. The psychological need feels met, but nothing real has been built, changed, or created. What happens to a society where millions of its men have psychologically withdrawn into simulated experience? Who maintains and builds the actual world? Increasingly, women. They fill this vacuum not because they sought it, but because someone must ensure reality continues functioning while men battle imaginary dragons. But here emerges the most bitter irony, the psychological twist that reveals the full extent of masculine weakness. As men retreat, they blame women for their own surrender. They point fingers at feminism for problems they themselves created. The accusation becomes the final refuge of the disempowered. This leads us to the fourth and perhaps most fundamental masculine weakness, the severed connection to the anima, the inner feminine that Jung identified as essential to complete masculine development. The man who cannot integrate his anima cannot access his full humanity. He becomes psychologically one-dimensional, emotionally stunted. You see these men everywhere. They cannot speak comfortably with women. They relate to the feminine only through awkward domination or uncomfortable servility. They lack access to their own emotional depth, their own intuitive wisdom, their own capacity for meaningful connection. A man disconnected from his anima cannot lead effectively because he cannot understand half of the human experience. He cannot inspire diverse groups. He cannot build genuine trust. He cannot hold the emotional complexity that leadership requires. How can a man who fears the feminine within himself possibly lead women in the outer world? And so again, women must step forward. They must assume leadership not because men openly refuse it, but because psychologically incomplete men cannot effectively exercise it. The anima-integrated woman often has better access to both masculine and feminine principles than the anima-severed man. She can operate across the full spectrum of human capacity while he remains confined to half his potential. This creates the vacuum at the heart of our question. When men are weak, depleted physically, undeveloped psychologically, escaped virtually, disconnected emotionally, women take the lead. They must. Nature demands balance. Power requires presence. When masculine power fades, feminine power necessarily grows stronger. This is neither progress nor regression. It is compensation. It is balance. It is the psyche's attempt to maintain wholeness when one of its fundamental aspects weakens. Jung understood that all psychological systems seek equilibrium, even when that means radical redistribution of energy. But understand this clearly. The rise of feminine leadership is not the cause of masculine weakness. It is the result. Women are not taking power from men. They are picking up what men have energetically abandoned. They are filling spaces men have vacated. They are assuming burdens men have subtly declined. Look around you. Where do you see this happening? In families where mothers make most decisions because fathers remain psychologically passive. In workplaces where women increasingly occupy leadership positions while men seem reluctant to fully engage. In communities where women create the social fabric while men retreat into individual pursuits. This shift brings both opportunity and challenge. For women, the opportunity to express leadership capacities long suppressed, but also the challenge of carrying dual burdens, the feminine and the masculine principles, when wholeness would suggest a partnership of equals. For men, this moment represents a fundamental choice. Continue the retreat into weakness or reclaim authentic masculine strength. Not domination, not tyranny, but presence, purpose, power expressed consciously, directed meaningfully, balanced with wisdom. What would it mean for men to address these four fundamental weaknesses? To manage vital energy consciously rather than dispersing it unconsciously. To complete psychological separation from the mother complex and claim full adult autonomy. To engage with real challenges rather than virtual simulations. To integrate the anima and access complete humanity. It would mean the emergence of men who lead not from insecurity disguised as strength, but from wholeness manifesting as natural authority. Men who partner with feminine power rather than either dominating or submitting to it. Men who bring masculine gifts fully developed to a world that needs them alongside fully developed feminine gifts. For this is the deeper truth. Humanity needs both masculine and feminine principles operating at full capacity, in balance, in harmony, in creative tension. The current compensation, women taking the lead as men weaken, is not the destination, but a phase in a longer psychological journey toward genuine partnership. Jung would tell us that true psychological growth moves not toward dominance of either masculine or feminine principles, but toward their integration, both within individuals and within the collective. The rise of feminine leadership may be necessary now, but the ultimate goal is neither matriarchy nor patriarchy, but a true marriage of complementary forces. This requires consciousness. Men must see and address their weaknesses not as personal failings, but as expressions of collective patterns. Women must lead not from resentment about carrying extra burdens, but from awareness of their role in this psychological compensation. Both must recognize this moment as transitional rather than terminal. What happens next depends on how consciously we navigate this shift. If men respond with resentment, withdrawing further into weakness, the imbalance worsens. If women embrace power without acknowledging its compensatory nature, we merely invert rather than resolve the pattern. But if men can reclaim authentic strength and women can wield leadership as stewardship rather than conquest, we may witness something unprecedented. A genuine partnership between masculine and feminine energies operating at full capacity, neither dominating the other, both serving life's evolution. What does this partnership actually look like? It looks like men who channel their vital energy consciously rather than dispersing it mindlessly. Men who have completed their psychological separation from maternal protection and stand as autonomous adults. Men who engage with real-world challenges rather than virtual distractions. Men who have integrated their anima and access their full humanity. It looks like women who lead not from resentment or necessity, but from authentic power. Women who welcome masculine strength rather than compensating for its absence. Women who understand that carrying both masculine and feminine principles is a temporary necessity, not a permanent solution. This partnership manifests as couples who make decisions together, neither dominating nor submitting. As workplaces where masculine and feminine approaches combine to create solutions neither could find alone. As communities where both protective strength and nurturing connection flourish side by side. The choice belongs to all of us. Will men continue weakening or find renewed authentic strength? Will women lead as temporary stewards or permanent replacements? Will we perpetuate imbalance or move toward wholeness? Will we remain unconscious of these patterns or bring them into the light where conscious choice becomes possible? Jung taught that increased consciousness is always the path to greater freedom. By seeing these patterns clearly, we gain the power to respond to them wisely. By understanding the psychological forces in play, we can work with them rather than being unconsciously driven by them. The weakness of men is not inevitable. The leadership of women is not final. Both represent a moment in our collective psychological development, a necessary compensation that points toward a more integrated future, if we have the wisdom to see it and the courage to create it. What patterns do you recognize in your own life? Where have you seen men retreat and women advance? What would genuine partnership between fully developed masculine and feminine principles look like in your relationships, your work, your community? I invite you to observe these dynamics not with judgment, but with curiosity. Not with blame, but with understanding. For only by seeing clearly can we choose consciously. And only by choosing consciously can we create the balanced world that waits beyond compensation, beyond weakness, beyond the pendulum swing of power. A world where neither men nor women take the lead, but where both walk side by side, bringing their unique gifts to the immense challenges we face together. This is not idealism. This is not fantasy. This is the natural evolution of consciousness that Jung saw as humanity's birthright and destiny. Will you participate consciously in this evolution? Will you address these patterns in yourself, in your relationships, in the systems you touch? The future of masculine and feminine power depends not on abstract forces, but on the conscious choices we make today. And those choices begin with seeing what is actually happening beneath the surface of our collective life, with understanding why men grow weak and women take the lead, with recognizing this not as an endpoint, but as a signal, a psychological call to greater awareness, greater integration, greater wholeness. Consider your own response to these observations. Do you feel defensive, angry, relieved, validated? These emotional reactions are not random. They reveal your position within this psychological drama. They show where you stand in relation to masculine weakness and feminine leadership. Men who bristle at these words often fear what they suspect may be true. Women who exhale in recognition often feel seen in their unrequested burden carrying. Your reaction is data. Your discomfort is information. Your resistance or acceptance tells a story about your own relationship with these primal energies. I speak these truths not to condemn but to illuminate, not to blame men for weakness or praise women for leadership, but to bring conscious attention to an unconscious process that affects us all. When patterns remain in shadow, they control us. When brought to light, they become tools for our growth. Ask yourself honestly, where have I retreated from my power? Where have I stepped into a vacuum left by others? Where have I witnessed this dance of withdrawal and advance in my family, my workplace, my community? What might change if I address this consciously rather than unconsciously? The cost of remaining unconscious is too high now. For men, it means continuing to live as shadows of their possible selves. For women, it means carrying burdens never meant to be theirs alone. For all of us, it means existing in a state of perpetual imbalance, where neither masculine nor feminine principles can fully serve life as they were designed to do. The time has come to answer this call, not with ideology, but with consciousness, not with blame, but with responsibility, not with fear, but with courage. The future of masculine and feminine power waits to be written by those awake enough to see beyond compensation to the possibility of true partnership.